add something here that I found also that was very hard to accept, perhaps for me personally, is that learning to nourish this proneness to high achieving behaviors is not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not easy peasy. It's workable, yes, but requires commitment. Commitment and I also think requires to live with intention in every choice we're making. And the reality is that many times when people are prone to high achieving behaviors because they deeply care, they want to give their best in every single area in our life. We want to be the best psychologists we can possibly be, the best parents we can be, the best cooks we can be, you name it. But living a life in which we learn to nourish perfectionistic actions without losing ourselves also means learning to say no, even to things that matter to us. And that's one of the brutal realities, that we think that we should say yes to every single thing that we care about. But that's humanly impossible. We are not superhumans. The day has X number of hours. We have certain limited amount of energy during the day, mental energy, emotional energy. So I think that what was hard for me was learning that in the name of my values, I have to stop sometimes working on some things. In the name of my values, I have to say no to a particular invitation because it is humanly impossible to give our best all the time in every single thing we do. Mm-hmm. So I think in some way also living our values is disconnecting from some things that are also important to us. And that's hard. That is really, really hard because we often encounter situations in which, okay, do I keep writing on my book or do I go to have a dinner with Diana, right? I care for the friendship, I care for the book, right? What do? I should try to do both. It doesn't work like that. There we are pushing ourselves again. So it's a little bit silly, but sometimes I say we need to stop in the name of our values. Mm-hmm. In the name of our values, we need to say no.
And that requires a lot of willingness, which is one of the processes in ACT, acceptance, allowing for the discomfort of saying no. And it really is in the surface, I think, of maybe a greater value of caring for yourself. It's sort of like a buffet. No matter how incredibly beautiful the buffet is and the restaurant is, if you pack too much on your plate, you're not going to be able to enjoy. You're not going to be able to savor each bite, no matter how good it is. Sometimes you need to say, I'm full. Like my tummy is full, my life is full, and I have to stop here. And I think that is that's challenging for me. And it's also, I think, challenging in a world where we have way more access than we ever have had to every single book that you could read. We love masterclass in our family. I could learn how to produce a movie. I could learn how to make a French tart. I could learn everything, right? It's all at my fingertips. And how do you make that discernment and choose and open to that feeling of I don't get to have it all. And it's okay, like, to feel that disappointment. It's also something that we need to teach our kids, because I think this is sort of bred early on. Our kids are overscheduled and they're exhausted, even though these are all wonderful things to do, but they're not experiencing that real psychological flexibility of, I'm going to say no here because it's important to me to be able to savor my yeses.
Yeah, I think for me, certainly has been hard and it's still hard. I think that what comes, as you were saying no in the name of our values requires willingness, requires saying yes to the pain that is going to come. Mm-hmm. Because of course we deeply care and you want to be the best mom and you want to make sure your kids have skills, right? But you also, when you say no, you have to make room for that sadness that may come, sometimes the disconnection, sometimes that frustration with yourself. So I think it's a very important micro skill that in the long term, it will help us to continue being ourselves without losing our minds, without losing our relationships. Not easy, but I think it's important to also remember that sometimes we think that, again, people who are prone with high achieving behaviors, and I know for myself, we think that living our values is giving our best to everything Human
Mhm.
impossible. We are not, we are not superhumans. We're human beings, not human doers, right? So I think learning to make room for what comes when we say no, even to something that matters, can be very liberating in the long term.
And it can be very connecting and freeing in our relationships. There's nothing I love more than being around friends who give me their time, give me their presence. I'm saying yes to you right now because I'm not running off to the next thing. And the same is true with our young children, because if we're so busy, we're not saying yes to that moment of like, hey, mommy, can I show you this thing that I just learned or this thing that I'm excited about at school because we're on to the next thing. There's a conversation that I had with Anna Lemke, who's a chief psychiatrist of addiction at Stanford, and she talks a lot about dopamine and how dopamine drives so much of our behavior. And when we do something for that hit, right, whether it's workaholism or that achievement, we get this spike in dopamine, but then we get this drop off. And the drop off is this low that then drives us to go and do it again. And what she really makes the argument for is that we need to get more comfortable with the in between, the dissatisfied state, so that when things that come that are good, they're more sustaining rather than pursuing that constant hit of dopamine. And I do think that saying no is strengthening our capacity to be with that discomfort. And the more that we have the ability to be with our own discomfort, the more freedom that we have in our life to choose things that are meaningful and to make decisions that are difficult for us. For me, leaving a podcast that I've been on for 5 years and saying goodbye, to something that was very very successful, very, doing so well, but
Mm-hmm.
listening to my own heart around this is something I need to say no to, even though it's good, so
Mm-hmm.
that I can make room for a yes in another area.
Yeah, it's incredible how quite often we have to make those choices.
Yeah.
I think life brings to us many opportunities in which we have to make these choices. If I can go back a little bit to something very powerful you say when you were mentioning this professor from Stanford, this dopamine high. When I talk to a lot of creative people, the writers, painters, graphic, and in those groups, there is a lot of people who are prone to high achieving behaviors, right? One of the things that I hear often is that there is this deep emptiness that may come when they are done with a project. And if they don't have the next project, there is just this space in which something is off, right? And I don't know if you relate to that, but I certainly have experienced that, right? When I'm done with a book, it's like, it's sweet, it's bittersweet, right? It's really sweet to see the book out there, to hear from people that are reading the book. But there is also this like, oh my gosh, there is the sadness a little bit, emptiness. And I do think it's very important to make room for that, to
Mhm.
sit with a to sit with a stillness, to sit with the stillness, and to sit with what's coming up to you in that moment without rushing. And I think once we also can nurture that, I think we can get better and better with the choices we make for the next project, if we want it to be a next, if we want it to be a next.
There's a being with that emptiness, but also finding the ground underneath it, that there's still a ground, even when it feels empty, there's still a ground because we are more than our achievements. We're more than
Yes.
our books. We are more than our looks. We are more than so many things. And I think that's where, for me, spiritual practice has really been helpful of like, where is my ground? And my
Mm.
my ground is feeling interconnected. It's connecting to nature. It's connecting to my true nature, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, my true nature, which isn't dependent upon this gold star or this trophy or this new thing. And so we can feel the emptiness of the loss of the thing. It's like the day after Christmas, like, oh, it's over, but not feel that we ourselves are nothing because we
Yeah.
don't have those things.
Yeah, I think for me, I think for me, learning that micro skill, a very important one, really came from ACT. I really believe that ACT has helped me to be a better human being, right? I think the other thing that happens is that, and I know this also for myself, there is so much pressure for people to find a perfect life work balance. When we have plenty of research showing that it doesn't work like
Mm,
that, right? Adam Grant, organizational psychologist who studied this a lot, he talks about finding rhythms. And I think that if you learn in your life to put your heart, your hands, and your feet when you're working on a project, and then also make room for practicing stillness, and you also make room to experiencing your values in different areas of your life, you are going to find more seasonal ways of living life and still doing what you care about without hurting yourself or the people around you.
mhm.
And I think that is also important when we think of striving or perfectionistic behaviors, that instead of shooting for this perfect life work balance, I think we learn to live with seasons. It's a more seasonal life, I would say.
It's a more seasonal life, and it's also seeing your life as an ecosystem. You know, that ecosystems have producers, ecosystems have, so those are the plants, ecosystems have consumers, the animals eat the plants, and ecosystems have decomposers. And the decomposers are what sort of break the material down and let it kind of settle and turn it back into the earth. We are good producers and we're good consumers as humans. We forget to decompose. And
Which we
so,
need.
which we need to decompose, and we also need to play. And if we can integrate play into our achievement, then that is also a fun part, because we're decomposing while we're producing, because that sort of creative play is a way of re-energizing ourselves and letting off steam and letting our mind go wherever it goes and be in the flow of it all. And I have felt that with you today in this interview.
Oh,
I felt play and I felt flow and I felt intimacy and connection. And that makes this not work, or it makes the wise effort of achievement in a skillful way that's not depleting.